Hello. I've just come back from a little walk around the block. I've been um, I've been considering chapter 6 of Fragments of an Unknown Teaching today, and Ouspensky talks about his experiences of walking around the block in Russia and remembering himself or not. And I just thought, just go and do it. So I put my raincoat on and got my keys and walked around the block. And what I did was to maintain the state of consciousness that's developed in my many long years Advaita studies and practice and teaching. And I could easily maintain that, which creates a permanent identity, unbroken. And because I was trying very hard, I was pushing it, and it became a little uncomfortable in the head, but then I could also relax it, and it was relatively painless and inherent. But there was a permanent, unbroken sense of identity. And then I switched to the state of awareness, which is a state also objective that's developed in Vipassana and Buddhist type practices, and I could maintain that. In fact, that's not exactly the state that I was maintaining, but I don't want to overcomplicate things. But there's a second state, and I could maintain that. See, the problem with the state of consciousness in Advaita is that it's very impersonal. And so, as I walk in the state of consciousness, I barely know what's going on with my body. Whereas the state of awareness is closer to the world, and there is some sense of being in the world and having control of the body and so on. Otherwise, the body just walks on its own, sort of thing. And then I could also, I just did this a little bit at the end, I could also maintain presence in my heart, meaning the heart chakra, if you like. I don't know a good word for that, 'cause I don't mean it in the typical way, but you can have a presence there, which is on the central line of your body between the nipples. There is a point, which is the heart, and you can maintain your presence there. And you can, presence meaning a continuous, unbroken sense of clear identity. And all these states are different, but yes, they pass Ouspensky's test. I'm going to go into this a little bit later on, but Ouspensky, he was concerned to maintain his awareness of objects in the distance, as well as maintain the sense of the subject. I wasn't doing that. I don't see any need to maintain the sense of objects. If I'm working with my identity, experimenting or practicing, then I'm just maintaining my identity, meaning I'm resting in the subject, either in any of these states. The states have different locations, but they also they have a different flavor to them. The state of consciousness, which is in the rear of the head, is very different to the state of the heart. Very different. But they are unbroken states of identity. The important thing is, in order to activate and understand these things, you need a teacher, and they need to show you. I was personally shown hundreds of hours over and over again how to activate these states. Especially the first state makes such a big difference to you, because you come out of being an unconscious person for the first time, and it's very, very difficult to understand. And it was the result of many retreats with different teachers, and then endlessly being beaten into me to do this practice, which was a particular practice given to me. It was difficult to learn. So I'm just talking here. I'm sharing some results of some work I've done today. So Ouspensky in chapter 6, he does a diagram with the subject and there's an arrow going out of it towards the object, and then there's a second diagram with that arrow having two ends, so it points both to the subject and the object. But I wasn't doing that. I was letting go of the object. In other words, I was not really maintaining contact with the world. I didn't need to, because my body was just walking and I didn't really need to know what was going on. At some point it became like some sort of dream or something, because I was wholly inside, or not completely, but mostly inside. So I let go of the world and just let my body walk. And that practice is a lot like walking with Jesus, which is a practice that some Christians do. You walk with Jesus. Jesus or Mary or any of these prayers are used to activate a higher consciousness. I think it probably makes it much easier. Because if you work with this kind of a technical Indian meditation, you have to be a certain kind of person to do that. You have to be comfortable with abstract things, and it's much easier for most people just to talk about the Father or the Mother or Jesus, and it's not wrong to do that. It's not of a lower ilk. It's just explained more in a friendly and pictorial, in a human way. That you're walking with Jesus, and you maintain contact with Jesus, with that feeling, and that becomes continuous, a continuous presence. That's just fine. That's just fine. And although I'm able to do very technical, I'm able to reflect to myself, to present to myself very technical guidance and practice from it. I sometimes practice in the Christian way from Mary or the Father, and it's all fine to me. I don't have any problem with that. I don't consider it to be a lower practice. In fact, because it gives you a real sense. If you talk about the Father as the origin or the Mother as love, it really does bring it home to you what it's about. So yes, I've just come back. I did a little walk. It was good. It was good. I'm going to read from chapter 6 of Fragments of an Unknown Teaching. Gurdjieff says, "Not one of you has noticed the most important thing that I have pointed out to you," he said. "That is to say, not one of you has noticed that you do not remember yourselves." I'm going to skip down a little bit now. Ouspensky's talking now. "These words of G's made me think a great deal. It seemed to me at once that they were the key to what he had said before about consciousness. But I decided to draw no conclusions whatever, but to try to remember myself while observing myself. The very first attempts showed me how difficult it was. Attempts at self-remembering failed to give any results, except to show me that in actual fact we never remember ourselves. 'What else do you want?' said G. This is a very important realization. People who know this," he emphasized these words, "already know a great deal. The whole trouble is that nobody knows it. If you ask a man whatever he can remember himself, he will of course answer that he can. If you tell him that he cannot remember himself, he will either be angry with you or he will think you are an utter fool. The whole of life is based on this, the whole of human existence, the whole of human blindness. If a man really knows that he cannot remember himself, he is already near to the understanding of his being." All that G said and all that I myself thought, and especially all that my attempts at self-remembering had shown me, very soon convinced me that I was faced with an entirely new problem which science and philosophy had not so far come across. But before making deductions, I will try to describe my attempts to remember myself. The first impression was that attempts to remember myself, or to be conscious of myself, to say to myself, I am walking, I am doing, and continually to feel this I, stopped thought. When I was feeling I could neither think nor speak. Even sensations became dimmed. Also, one could only remember oneself in this way for a very short time. I had previously made certain experiments in stopping thought, which are mentioned in books on yoga practices. For example, there is such a description in Edward Carpenter's book, From Adam's Peak to Elephanta, although it is a very general one, and my first attempts to self-remember reminded me exactly of these, my first experiments. Actually, it was almost the same thing, with the one difference that in stopping thoughts, attention is wholly directed towards the effort of not admitting thoughts, while in self-remembering, attention becomes divided. One part it is directed towards the same effort, and the other part to the feeling of self. This last realization enabled me to come to a certain, possibly a very incomplete, definition of self-remembering, which nevertheless proved to be very useful in practice. I am speaking of this division of attention, which is the characteristic feature of self-remembering. I represented it to myself in the following way. When I observe something, my attention is directed towards what I observe, a line with one arrowhead. There's a diagram here, I, then an arrow pointing towards the observed phenomenon. When at the same time I try to remember myself, my attention is directed both towards the object observed and toward the subject. A second arrowhead appears on the line, and there's a diagram here. It's the same one as the earlier one, I, with an arrow pointing towards the observed phenomenon, but this arrow now has got two ends, one pointing back to the eye. Having defined this, I saw that the problem consisted in directing attention on oneself, without weakening or obliterating the attention directed on something else. Moreover, this something else could as well be within me as outside me. The very first attempts at such a division of attention showed me its possibility. At the same time, I saw two things clearly. In the first place, I saw that self-remembering resulting from this method had nothing in common with self-feeling or self-analysis. It was a new and very interesting state with a strangely familiar flavour. And secondly, I realized that moments of self-remembering do occur in life, although rarely. Only the deliberate production of these moments created the sensation of novelty. Actually, I had been familiar with them from an early childhood. They came either in new and unexpected surroundings, in a new place, among new people, while travelling, for instance, when suddenly one looks about. If you'd like to listen to the rest of this recording and others, I've put them on Odyssey, where there's no time limit. So please have a look on there. I've put the link down below. Take care.